Dear learners, now after understanding different forecasting methods, let's try to understand how to calculate these different forecasts in Microsoft Excel. Now, it is very important for every business professional to understand Microsoft Excel and how to do the forecasting within the Microsoft Excel, because many of the businesses are still using Microsoft Excel for data analysis, and this is a basic tool that is frequently used for the analysis purpose. Now, to do the forecasting in Microsoft Excel, we have considered multiple different forecasting methods here. So there are 7 different forecasting methods that we will see in this session, and we will also see how to do the forecasting in Microsoft Excel. Now, let's start with the basics of the forecasting. So, as we know, for every forecasting, we actually need the demand history or the data of the past demands. And demands are nothing but the orders that we have received from the customer. Now, if you can see this entire Excel spreadsheet on the blue headings, you will see the raw data that is actually our input, and this data will convert into the forecast, which is actually into the green headings on right side, which will come in the calculations. If you see the column A, it talks about the product, and we have considered the same product to do the forecasting with the different forecasting methods. So our product here is a business laptop, which is 8 GB RAM and 256 GB hard disk. The product family is business laptop, so if you have a different product, like the gaming laptop, the product family will be different, which will be the gaming laptop. Now we have considered different forecasting methods here, and each forecasting method has its own importance. We will start first with naive forecasting method, then moving to average forecasting method, then weighted moving average forecasting method, and then exponential smoothing. Further, we will see Excel inbuilt forecasting formulas like forecast.linear, which is the inbuilt function of the Microsoft Excel, then forecast.ETS. So ETS is nothing but exponential triple smoothing, which is basically one of the advanced forecasting methods. And finally, we will talk about the growth formula for the forecasting calculation. Now, we have already seen the naive forecasting method concepts and calculations, and what we learned is that in this forecasting method, the input data that is required for us is the demand data. Now, how this forecasting is done is basically, we have already seen that formula represents as the next period's forecast is actually a last period's demand value. So it is very simple. There is no major calculation as such in the naive forecasting method. And let's understand how to do that. So we have a demand data from January till December 2021, and the demand for January was 260 quantity. For February, it was 322 quantity. For March, it was 430 quantity, and so on. Now we have to forecast for the month of January 2022 till the month of December 2022. Also, on the right side, there are 2 trend lines that are created for demand data trend line and forecast data trend line. Now, how to create that trend line? Let's understand that. Okay, so to create the trend line, what we do, we basically go into the Insert tab, and here you will see the line option. Once you click on the line, you will get the option for a data range. Now, once we select the data range, that is from January till December 2021, which is our demand data, you will click OK, and your trend line will be shown here. You can further drag this formula down, and the trend line will be calculated in those cells. Similarly, for the forecast, we have to also have a forecast trend line, and we will again go to the Insert, you will see the line option, and here you will get the data range. Now, we don't have a forecast calculated as such, but let's first select the data pointers, which is from January to December 2022, and we will click OK. The forecast lines will be appearing here once we have the forecast numbers. So let's take an example. If we put some random forecast numbers, this line will be created. I will just put some numbers here, and you can see that the forecast line is created there. Okay, you can see the forecast line is getting created, so that is how this line will show you. It will represent you the behavior of your data. So from this demand data, the behavior that we see is a cyclical data, where you see ups and downs in a particular period of time. Okay, now we have to do the forecasting. Now let's start with our first method, which is naive forecasting method. And the formula for naive forecasting method is nothing but the future demand forecast is equal to the past demand data. So here, for January 2022, we will put the formula that is equal to Q2, and once we put that, we will understand that the January 2022 forecast is simply 446 quantity. Now the same will happen in future, like if this formula will be dragged in the future, and you will see that every month you will see the same forecast. And that's the limitation of the naive forecasting method. Unless and until you don't have visibility for actual demand data of the past period, you cannot actually forecast for the future period in a better way. So let's assume that the actual demand for January 2022 was 580 quantity. The future forecast will also become 580 quantity. So what you understand here is it is forming a trend line throughout the period. Okay, so this is our naive forecasting.
And now, let's move to the next forecasting method. The next forecasting method is a moving average forecasting method. We have already seen what is moving average, and the data points required for moving average method are basically two data points. First is the demand data that is common for all the forecasting methods, and second is the period that is N value. Now this period can be defined by demand planners, like they can consider 3 months of demand in the past as an average, or 4 months of demand in the past as an average, or maybe 5 months in the past as an average. In this particular session, we have considered N value as 3. That means, to calculate the future forecast, we will average out last 3 months demand data. So let's go in our forecasting calculation, and for January 2022, if we have to calculate the forecast, we will simply average demand of last 3 months, so the formula will be equal to average, and we will average out last 3 months. So this is basically O3 to Q3. So O3 means basically demand data of October, Q3 is demand data of December, and P3 is demand data of November. So we will just average it out and enter. So you will see the forecast for the January 2022 is 399 quantity. Now, I will simply drag this formula in the future, and you will again notice that at certain period of time, this is also forming a trend line. This is because the previous demands that are also getting smoothened as we are just averaging out the past 3 months of demand data. And unless and until you don't have much visibility about your past demands, let's say in the month of March, if the demand rise to 600 quantity, the future demands will also rise. Okay, so it is also a simple method which simply averages out a particular period of the time, and accordingly the forecast is created. Now, if you see the forecast line here, it will show you a spike, and then it would again go as a simple line in the future. Now let's move ahead to the weighted moving average method. We have also seen this method, and we understood that this is a similar method as compared to the moving average method. The only difference is it gives different weightages to the different time periods that we select, and most probably the recent time period gets higher weightage because the recent market demand or recent behavior of the market gives better understanding of the future forecast to show them better. So simply, how this forecasting method is done, it is assigning weight to the different demand periods. Now in this particular example, what we have considered is, we have considered 3 months period, that means n is equal to 3. And our weightages for the previous month's demand, that is W1 is 65%, then 2 months ago demand will have weightage of 25%, then 3 months ago demand will have 10% weightage. And after giving these weightages, we will be able to understand the future forecast. Here, if you notice the recent demand weight, that is W1 has been given a more weightage, that is 65%. One more rule in this particular method is, the weightage of all the demands should be equal to 100%, and that's the thumb rule for this forecasting method. Now let's move to the January 2022 forecasting period. Here we have already seen that we have different weightages, that is 65, 25 and 10%. So our formula becomes equal to 65% into the previous month's demand. That means the demand for December 2021, which is basically Q4, I will close this bracket, plus the second weightage was 25%, that is W2, and then I will select demand 2 months ago, that is November 2021, and now I will add the last demand, that is the weightage was 10%, and it will be multiplied with 3 months ago demand, that is October 2021. I will close the bracket, and if you see, my forecast is 431 quantity. Now, I will simply drag this formula in the future, and you will see that this formula also gives a trend line at in a future time. I mean, it starts its trend line immediately. This is also a limitation of this particular method, and you will realize that unless and until you don't have better visibility of your demands, you will not be able to forecast in the future in a better way. Here, if you see the trend line, it is also as similar as moving average method. The only difference that has created more weightage to the recent demand data.